The best organizations on the planet advanced toward progress due to keen business choices and quality items and administrations. However, now and again, an enterprise can't see the potential in an open door thumping on their entryway, prompting some remorseful choices. A portion of these botched chances brought about the beginning of adversary organizations, made existing contenders thrive, and even prompted a few organizations getting come up short on business. While now and again, careful decisions must be made, at different occasions, organizations completely dismissed thoughts and recommendations that could have either spared them from inevitable rot or pushed them higher than ever. Here are 10 open doors a few organizations passed on, at last prompting their destruction or a huge loss of income. 10. MySpace and Facebook. MySpace was an entirely famous web-based life site made by a yearning gathering of Friendster clients in 2003. It took off in prevalence, to such an extent that it considered obtaining Facebook perhaps the hardest adversary at that point. The brains behind MySpace, Chris DeWolf, had a couple of gatherings with Facebook originator Mark Zuckerberg in secret in different endeavors at consolidating the two organizations. At long last, DeWolf turned down Zuckerberg's proposal to sell Facebook to him for $75 million. A conspicuous misstep, since Facebook is presently worth many billions of dollars. From that point forward, the measure of MySpace clients has plunged. It was purchased by Rupert Murdoch's News Corp in 2005 for over $500 million and afterward offered to advertisement tech firm Viant's Specific Media for $35 million of every 2011. In the long run, it wound up nearly unintentionally being claimed by Time Inc. at the point when they gained Viant. 9. Real networks and the iPod. In 2000, Tony Fadell had a thought of a premium MP3 player with a smooth structure and a smoothed-out substance conveyance framework. He drew nearer real networks with his idea, just to be dismissed on the grounds that the organization couldn't perceive any potential for an individual music gadget in their portfolio. Fadell likewise went to talk about the thought with Philips, yet they additionally turned him down. In the long run, Fadell moved toward Apple with the thought, and they completely adored it. Mac chose to consolidate the thought with the Music Conveyance Administration they'd purchased a couple of months before called SoundJam MP, which we as a whole know and love today as iTunes. The first iPod hit the racks on November 10, 2001. Before that year's over, the organization had just sold 125,000 units. Today, the iPod has a few emphasis, and Apple has sold a huge number of units. To make an already difficult situation even worse, Real Networks additionally dismissed Valve for their concept of a game customer like Steam directly before Valve chose to take it on themselves. Fadell proceeded to be the fellow benefactor of the home computerization organization known as Nest Labs. 8. Marvel and DC Comics. Everybody realizes that Marvel and DC Comics are two mammoths in the realm of comic books, yet it wasn't generally similar to that. In 1984, Warner Brothers considered DC to be as deadweight and offered its characters and stories to Marvel, since they accepted that their books were predominant and selling better. Wonder could have assumed control over DC's 7 most famous properties: Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Justice League, Teen Titans, and Legion of Superheroes. Wonder declined the offer, imagining that the motivation behind why DC Comics was falling flat was a result of their characters, not their administration. Longer than 10 years after the fact, Marvel spiraled into liquidation. They were purchased before they were absolutely done for, however. 7. Nintendo sidestepping a Super Mario Bros. 3 port to PC. At the point when Super Mario Bros. 3 came out on the NES, it was a gaming marvel. Right up till the present time, Super Mario Bros. 3 is still viewed as a standout amongst other computer games. Time. In 1990, a gathering of software engineers cooperated to make a PC port of Super Mario Bros. 3 with expectations of Nintendo approving it. This gathering of software engineers included coding legend John Carmack. They really prevailing with regards to making a port of the game on PC, a stunning accomplishment of programming at that point. Be that as it may, Nintendo passed on the thought, keeping their games on their own consoles. This, be that as it may, ended up being an enormous misstep. Those equivalent developers cooperated to begin their own organization, referred to today as id Software. id Software proceeded to discharge momentous PC games, for example, Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, characterizing PC gaming during the 1990s. Despite the fact that their games were loaded with carnage and brutality, they despite everything caught the hearts of a huge number of devoted fans. Who realizes what could have been if Nintendo had approved the Super Mario Bros. 3 PC port? Would any semblance of doom ever have existed or not? 6. Nintendo vs. Sony. In 1989, Nintendo and Sony were cooperating stealthily on another adaptation of the Super NES with an implicit CD drive. They declared their task at the Consumer Electronics Show in 1991, and it was known as the Nintendo PlayStation from the start. However, everything wasn't working out in a good way in the background. Nintendo turned out to be progressively careful about Sony's expectations, imagining that they needed to utilize the undertaking as an approach to muscle into the gaming industry. Obviously, their suspicion was supported, as Sony engineer Ken Kutaragi considered it to be his initial step to accomplishing his fantasy about getting Sony to begin making game consoles. A day in the wake of reporting the venture, Nintendo supplanted Sony with their Dutch opponent, Philips. Sony's leader, Norio Oga, was angry about it. He worked with Kutaragi to make Sony Computer Entertainment, which proceeded to make their own consoles. The final product was the Sony PlayStation, one of the greatest innovative headways of computer games during the 1990s. 5. Decca Records and the Beatles. In December 1961, an A&R agent from Decca Records went to a cavern execution by the Beatles. It was anything but a sufficient show to make sure about them a record bargain, yet he invited the band for a meeting over in one of their studios in London as another opportunity. On New Year's Day, the gathering went down from Liverpool through blizzards to make it without a moment to spare for their 11 a.m. tryout. Justifiably, the Beatles were somewhat irritated in light of the way that the A&R delegate appeared late and demanded that they utilize Decca's speakers. There, they recorded 15 tunes in about 60 minutes. Despite the fact that their nerves implied that they didn't perform at their best, they were as yet certain that their meeting worked out in a good way and that they would get the record bargain. However, Decca was inclining more toward marking another band called Brian Poole and the Tremolos. The Beatles passed up marking a record managed Decca, the official explanation being that guitar bunches are in transit out, Mr. Epstein. These words got famous throughout the following scarcely any years as the Beatles soared to progress and overall notoriety. 4. Hewlett-Packard and the personal computer. Steve Wozniak worked for Hewlett-Packard (HP) when he was more youthful. While he was utilized there, he dealt with a plan for a PC. He offered the structure to HP multiple times and got turned down every single time. Wozniak additionally structured the main breakout game for Atari, despite the fact that he was as yet a representative at Hewlett-Packard. He needed to remain faithful to HP, despite the fact that they over and over hit him in the face with his idea for a PC. Steve Jobs attempted to persuade Wozniak to leave HP to begin Apple with him, yet he just wouldn't move. That incited Jobs to move toward Wozniak's family to persuade him to leave Hewlett-Packard. In the end, Wozniak's family had the option to get him to do as such, and Wozniak and Jobs proceeded to build up Apple. They utilized Wozniak's idea for a PC and made the absolute first of a lot increasingly effective gadgets to come, the Apple IPC. 3. Blockbuster and Netflix. In 2000, Blockbuster CEO John Antioco was drawn closer by Reed Hastings to purchase the organization he'd established, Netflix, from him for $50 million. At that point, Netflix was a DVD mailing administration. Antioco considered it to be a little specialty business and passed on the open door after a few exchange gatherings. Antioco's choice was clarified by a previous Blockbuster official in a meeting with Variety, saying that Netflix was losing cash and that administration and vision were two separate things. Today, Netflix is worth billions. Presently, the organization has a huge number of endorsers and is accessible in a large portion of the world. Netflix has successfully forced Blockbuster to leave business. 2. Excite and Google. Energize was one of the Internet's first entryways. In any case, when they were drawn nearer by the organizers of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, in 1999, they were offered the opportunity to purchase Google for $1 million. From the start, Excite's CEO George Bell dismissed Google's proposal of $1 million. Be that as it may, after a couple of exchanges, the cost was spoken condescendingly to $750,000. It despite everything wasn't sufficient for Bell, and he wound up dismissing their last offer. Today, obviously, Google rules the internet. Energize wound up being obtained by Ask Jeeves in 2004, which inevitably changed to Ask.com and wound up possessed by Barry Diller's IAC. Who realizes what may have happened to Google if Excite had obtained it? What might have happened to phrases like Googling? 1. Verizon not launching the first iPhone. Ivan Seidenberg, the CEO of Verizon at that point, went to a yearly media meeting in 2006. He saw that Walt Disney CEO Bob Iger had a strangely molded mobile phone in his grasp. Inquisitive, Seidenberg moved toward him to ask what it was. Iger basically set it aside and said that it would change the world. All that Verizon knew was that Apple's CEO Steve Jobs was on Disney's governing body. They accepted that they'd got a brief look at an Apple gadget. Before long, Apple contacted Verizon Wireless and mentioned a gathering. Occupations and his group got together with the business and specialized authority of Verizon Wireless. Employments raised the subject of how Verizon dealt with item advancement and everything else identified with it. He obviously tried how existing PDA highlights were absolutely restricting, paving the way to acquainting the iPhone with them. The main issue that was at the forefront of everybody's thoughts was if Apple would make an iPhone variant perfect with Verizon's CDMA-based system. Employments saw the universal highest quality level of sell items to be the Global System for Mobile Interchanges (GSM). Regardless of Verizon's earnest attempts, Apple chose to go with AT&T's GSM-based system. The iPhone was discharged only to AT&T clients in 2007. Despite the fact that the choice was a piece of Jobs' structure dominance, it was as yet a devastating dissatisfaction for Verizon, and it cost them a serious lump of customer base. On the off chance that loan they'd been eager to construct, or as of now had, a GSM-based system. We're at the end of this video. If you like the video, don't forget to comment, like the video and subscribe to the channel.